Happy Tuesday, everyone. It's February 11th. I'm Michelle Morton here in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Here are your top stories today. Salmon Arm RCMP have recovered the body of an 18-year-old man who fell through the ice on Shuswap Lake on Saturday. Police say after an extensive search by the RCMP dive team and local search and rescue, they found the teen's body in the late afternoon on Monday. Police are now reminding people to stay off frozen lakes because changing temperatures can make ice conditions unpredictable. Speed is believed to have been a factor in a fatal crash in Surrey overnight. Police say one person has died after hitting a power pole near 104th Avenue and 123A Street. 104th was closed for several hours as BC Hydro crews were called in to fix the pole and wires. The road has since reopened to traffic. The Independent Investigations Office is looking into a teen's death in Surrey on Sunday. The civilian watchdog says RCMP responded to reports of a person with a weapon at Clayton Heights Secondary School before 3 p.m. About 30 minutes later, the situation had moved 2 or 3 blocks to 185th Street and 70th Avenue. That's where neighbors say they heard 2 shots.
We heard a couple of loud bangs, right? But I thought somebody was kicking in my back door. So it kind of startled the dog and myself, and I got a pretty big dog, right? And then a couple minutes later, there was, when cops knock on your door, it's a bang, 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 like the whole house is coming down, right?
Clayton Heights Secondary put out a statement saying a student had died on the weekend. Students at the school has identified the victim as a grade 10 student. With a snowstorm forecast for Washington, D.C. today, BC Premier David Eby left for the U.S. Capitol last night. He spoke to reporters at YVR ahead of talks with government and business leaders. Yesterday, U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order slapping 25% tariffs on imported aluminum and steel. Eby is part of a Team Canada approach by premiers to discuss looming tariffs imposed by the U.S.
My understanding on the best advice that we've received is that things are very fluid right now in Washington, D.C., especially for those decision makers who are closest to the president. If we are fortunate enough to get one of those meetings that will be confirmed potentially as close to as the day before or the day of the meeting.
Eby says premiers are also working hard on clearing interprovincial trade barriers and diversifying the Canadian economy. A legendary aircraft that fought wildfires in BC for nearly 50 years has completed its final flight. The Philippine Mars water bomber left its longtime base in Port Alberni on Sunday, bidding farewell to BC. After a brief stop in San Francisco, the aircraft landed in Arizona's Lake Pleasant last night. The longtime owner of the large plane says the aircraft will be dismantled before being trucked to its final resting place at the Pima Air and Space Museum in Tucson.
Well, we're actually just thrilled that we've been able to find a home the stature of the Pima Aerospace Museum. They're wonderful people, and we know they're going to look after this aircraft as we have, and has been a real great piece of our aviation history as a family company.
The aircraft is one of only 6 Martin Mars planes ever made, with just 2 remaining. And those are your morning headlines. You're watching CBC News BC. I'm Michelle Morton. Stay right here. BC Today with Amy Bell is up next.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. As tariffs and tension rise between Canada and the U.S., many people won't be traveling across the border anytime soon. So where else can you go? We'll take a look at the holiday gems that might be hiding in your own backyard and how to plan your best local vacations. And the Juno nominations are out. We'll check in with Vibin host Rohit Joseph to see if there were any shakeups in the Canadian music scene. I'm Amy Bell in for Michelle Elliott. This is BC Today. And thank you for joining us on radio, TV, and live stream. You can call us now on our top story. Have you reconsidered your plans to travel in the U.S.? And where else are you hoping to holiday? Our number is 604-669-3733. You can also call 1-800-825-5950 or just hit pound 690 on your cell. You can always email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. And key Canadian industries are confronting a fresh U.S. tariff deadline and the economic disruption that comes with it. And for the tens of thousands of Canadians who make steel and aluminum, there is new uncertainty over the future of their jobs. Starting with this morning's first reaction from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum would be entirely unjustified. We are the U.S.'s closest ally. Our economies are integrated. Canadian steel and aluminum is used in a number of key American industries, whether it's defense, shipbuilding, manufacturing, energy, automotive. We should be doing more together, not fighting with each other, but Canadians will stand up strongly and firmly if we need to.
That's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau reacting to the new steel and aluminum tariffs announced yesterday by Donald Trump. And Canadians are looking at different ways to hit back, swapping Pittsburgh for Paris, Florida for Fredericton, or maybe New York for Yorkshire. Canadians are thinking about travel to alternative destinations outside of the United States. So are you avoiding travel to the States? Where would you rather go other than to our neighbors to the south? Anywhere in Canada or internationally? Call us at 1-800-825-5950. 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone, or email bctoday@cbc.ca. Joining us now is McKenzie McMillan. He is a travel consultant with the Travel Group. So nice to have you back with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been an interesting week so far. Once again. So what are you, I guess, seeing from some of your clients right now, or perhaps what are you expecting to see from your clients?
Yeah, so we've already seen certain clients actually canceling trips they've already booked to the United States, trips over spring break or over the next few months. But the one thing we're really hearing is from clients saying, I need something to do this summer, but the plan that I was thinking is no longer viable. I would like to go somewhere else. Where do you recommend? And what do you say to them? I think a lot of people, especially for family vacations, they might have a place they return to time and time again, and it quite often is somewhere in the States. So how do you sort of open up somebody's eyes to fresh horizons? Well, there is a whole world out there. There's also a whole country that we live in right here. So it always depends on what people are comfortable with spending, what kind of limitations they may have, either financially or with, who's traveling with them, if they're traveling with small children, et cetera, that could play a part. The U.S. was or has always been an easy destination for people, even with families, because it's of the proximity. So, we have seen clients interested in places like Mexico is probably going to do quite well just because of the proximity, not too much further than the United States is.
True.
We've also heard interest in Iceland. Again, especially for travelers coming from the East Coast, it's only about a 5 or a 6 hour flight, and Europe as well. But definitely for family vacations, I think looking right in our own back door is a good idea. Places like Montreal, Quebec City, Toronto, and I'm speaking obviously coming from Vancouver, but even more local, Tofino, Whistler, even in places like Kelowna would be a nice quick getaway.
Well, and I think we are so blessed here in BC. We have incredible places that you can get to very quickly. One thing I know that's appealing for the US for a lot of people is that it can actually be cheaper to fly to a US destination than it is even to fly somewhere in our country, especially if you're going from one side of Canada to the other.
That's right.
So how do you sort of work around that?
That's a tough one because we can't change the way that the airlines are pricing their flights.
Right.
So the best I can suggest is to shop around, try to book as far in advance as you can. And definitely if you're looking for a family summer vacation in Canada, I would not wait to book, because we may be boycotting the United States, but the United States travelers are not boycotting Canada yet. So places like Tofino, Whistler, Banff, they are going to book up very fast, and you're going to see those prices really start to skyrocket, especially as we get into the spring.
Well, and I wanted to ask you about that because the dollar stretches, the US dollar stretches so much further here. We've always seen that big influx. So is this, perhaps going to be sort of a booming time for the hospitality industry here in Canada?
Yeah, it's really hard to say right now, but definitely if our dollar takes any more of a hit, we probably will see local travelers not traveling or staying local, but American travelers, absolutely. This becomes a very desirable destination. Americans account for a huge amount of our international tourism in the summer.
Yeah.
Places like Vancouver, we're going to rely, we are heavily involved with Americans on the Alaska cruise business. And even though the Alaska cruises generally are going to US ports, they all start in Vancouver, and most American travelers will spend at least 2 to 3 days in Vancouver spending American dollars before they embark on their ship.
No,
so
that's very true.
So definitely for Canadians that want to stay local, plan ahead.
Okay. We've got a couple of calls that have come in already. One from Sandra in North Vancouver. Hi, Sandra.
Hi.
So what are you feeling about travel to the US these days?
Oh, I won't do it.
Okay.
I was invited to a wedding of a close relative in Los Angeles coming up this summer, and I'm not going. But I did book a trip to Ireland that I'm going on in April.
Oh,
and,
lovely.
It was booked, as it turns out, through a U.S. company. Not a U.S. A U.S. company does the bookings.
Okay.
It's an Irish-owned company, but because of how it was structured many years ago. So I just paid the last installment in American dollars, and I'll tell you, it was painful. So I just wanted to say to people who are booking trips away, if they are wanting to boycott U.S. businesses, they should check to make sure that the booking companies aren't American.
That is a very good tip, Sandra. Thank you for that, and enjoy your trip in Ireland. That sounds amazing. McKenzie, you're nodding yes.
This is something that we're really just starting to hear, is a lot of clients that maybe had no intention of going to the United States, but are now looking really hard at who they're booking through, what companies they're booking through. Cruise lines are a great example. We've had clients that have said they do not want to travel on a US-based cruise line. That is easier said than done, because almost every cruise line, major cruise line, is owned by 2 or 3 US-based cruise companies.
Right.
So definitely with tour operators, it's going to be the same thing. A lot of them are US-based. Now, there are tour operators that are based in Europe, not so much in Canada, but definitely in other countries that do still charge in US dollars. That shouldn't deter people from using them if they're not based in the United States, but US dollars just happen to be generally the international currency that most of these companies are using for Western travelers.
Right.
So definitely I like the advice that was in that call. Look at who you're booking through. There are a number of fantastic tour operators that do international touring in Asia and in Europe and in the South Pacific that are Canadian based, that are worth looking into as well.
All right. And Sandra also brought up another point, that she's choosing not to go to a wedding because that would mean she has to travel to the US. And my heart does go out to so many people that will face that. It's not just necessarily travel for pure enjoyment. There's family and dear friends that they aren't going to be able to see because they choose that. Are you hearing any of those sort of difficult conversations?
Definitely, and we definitely have a lot of clients that are cross-border families, where some members of the family are in Florida or they're in New York or wherever in the United States, and if you feel strongly about what's happening, there are some tough decisions and some tough conversations you may have to have. But the most important thing is when you're spending your hard-earned money to travel, you need to be comfortable with your investment, and there's no point in traveling somewhere if you're not going to feel like you've made a good decision. So it's unfortunate, and I definitely feel that it's too bad that this is probably where we're going right now. But maybe they can come to Canada instead.
their dollar will go far.
That's right, exactly.
We would love to have more people join this conversation. Let us know if you are avoiding travel to the U.S. Maybe you've got a local hidden gem that you would recommend people do travel to, either with families or more of an adults only. Call 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can email bctoday@cbc.ca and just let us know if you do plan on traveling in the U.S. for the foreseeable future. We do have a call on the line from Adam in North Vancouver. Hi, Adam. Thanks for joining the show today.
Hey there, Amy. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Yeah, I very much want to contribute to this conversation. I'm an avid motorcyclist. I do about 10,000 kilometers a year.
Oh, wow.
Typically in the summertime. Often on my own. I did about 8,000 last year around the Four Corner states in the U.S., starting out from here in North Vancouver. So, it's a shame. I've got friends down there. We go to motorcycle rallies down there, but I just said no more. I'm now looking at our beautiful province of BC and trying to recreate a trip I did a while back with my wife in the car, which is to go up to Prince Rupert and then across the 16. This time taking a side trip to Bella Coola as part of that, all on motorcycles. This time with a friend who lives in Benticton. So really looking forward to this trip and will not regret not going south. It's a shame because it's a big country, it's a beautiful country, but it's not really something that feels welcoming anymore.
No, and I think that echoes the sentiment that a lot of people are feeling, Adam. And thank you for sharing that and enjoy it. Sounds like an amazing trip.
I know. I'm a little bit jealous of that trip,
right,
actually.
Adam?
I need to learn how to ride a motorcycle now.
There is that flaw in my dream.
Yeah.
I have not yet mastered that. I barely can master a bicycle at this point. We did get an email as well. Lee writes, I've avoided all travel to the USA since about 2018. I've traveled in the meantime to Mexico and to Europe and will continue to do so. There are very beautiful parts in the States, but the people and their old-fashioned ideologies scare me and ruin it. And Veril writes, my Canadian friends have canceled their planned Alaskan cruise. Supposed to travel to Alaska in June, and they say, no way will they travel to that U.S. state. And Joanne writes, there are many Canadians who travel by vehicle to the USA, and in our small world, we know 4 different families who cannot swallow supporting the U.S. in response to Donald Trump's annexing Canada by creating economic crisis. The Canadian dollar plays a part in travel to the USA, but for Americans, their dollar will go a long way. I used to operate an Airbnb, and one question I used to get was, is your price in American or Canadian dollars? Maybe operators of Airbnb should say it is in American dollars. I know I would as a way of protesting what America is doing to Canada. So a lot of people obviously thinking about this very seriously right now. And as Lee wrote, have been thinking about it since Donald Trump's first term, perhaps, and have taken U.S. travel off the board. For many people, travel is it's a very special event. It's something that they perhaps have saved money for and have planned for months or maybe even years. And now they are faced with perhaps giving up that dream trip. Right. What kind of conversation or I guess maybe guidance would you give to somebody that is in that position? Yeah, I mean, the main thing is like what I said earlier about you have to be comfortable with your investment, whether it's a 4-day trip to Washington State or it's a 2-week trip all down the east coast of the U.S., whether you're spending $100 or you're spending $10,000 on a trip. You need to be comfortable with what you're spending. Travel is meant to be joyous. It's meant to lift people up, and it's meant to be a way to build memories instead of just buying things with your hard-earned money. Yeah. And there's no point in doing that if you are conflicted about it or you feel bad about it. So for some people, they won't have an issue with traveling to the United States, and for them, absolutely go for it. Yeah. But for people that are having conflicts with it, this does feel different than 2016 for I think a lot of travelers, where it was more anecdotally. I don't really agree with their politics. I'm going to try to avoid the U.S. I think so. And I think now it's like there's just no way I can go. Yeah. And so I think if you're in that column, don't feel pressure to spend your money or feel pressure to do something that's not going to make you comfortable. Personally, if I felt conflicted about going to the United States, I would rather spend a little bit more of my hard-earned money to go somewhere where I'm going to enjoy the entire trip. And, I think that's a healthy way to look at it for a lot of travelers. That is a very good way to look at it. We'll take a call now from Steve in Victoria. Hi, Steve.
Yeah, hi there.
And what are your thoughts on travel to the U.S.?
Well, I think somebody already said this. I mean, there's a lot of beautiful things to see in the U.S., and I keep wanting to go and spend a lot of time in the American Southwest, having previously been across the U.S. South and so on, and enjoyed, the food and, all kinds of things. But now that they have elected a leader who seems hell-bent and determined to destroy this country, I can't imagine why I would want to go there, my relatives in the U.S. notwithstanding. So, for this coming late spring and summer, because I'm retired and I have a camper van, I'm thinking of going back up to Barkerville in the Caribou.
Oh, nice.
And spending some time around there and the Bowen Lakes. And then after that, down into the southeastern portion of the province, because I want to revisit Fort Steele near Cranbrook. So those are like two ideas, and then, of course, everything in between. Plus, I'm looking seriously at a tour in Central Europe, hitting Prague and Vienna and Budapest and a number of places that I've never been before, but not the U.S.
Well, I think that sounds wonderful, Steve, and I thank you for taking the time to call in. If nothing else, I'm getting fabulous travel ideas and travel envy from all of these people having these great trips planned.
That one actually brought me back to my childhood because I used to do that with my parents, go up to Barkerville when I was a kid, and it's always such good memories. I did want to mention one thing that he mentioned about going on a tour in Central Europe. I know that a lot of Canadians are a little bit apprehensive about Europe because of how strong the euro is compared to the dollar. Going on a pre-organized tour, whether it's a large bus tour or a small group adventure tour, can be a great way to do that type of travel without it really hitting the bank too hard, because there are a lot of companies, especially Canadian-based tour operators, that charge in Canadian dollars, and that covers your accommodation, in some cases your food. So it takes a huge chunk out of what you'd have to spend in euros when you're there. So for places like Iceland, Europe, the UK, if you are comfortable with traveling with other people, it might be worth looking into small group adventure tours or main sort of tour companies as a way to prepay in Canadian dollars and avoid some of that that horrible currency exchange at the moment. But
it can hit you hard.
When he mentioned that, it kind of struck me that that's something that we've seen a lot of our clients looking into as a way to save a little bit of money and kind of take away that hit of the Canadian dollar.
That is a great recommendation. I thank you for that. Nancy, in North Vancouver, you've got some experience with a friend, I believe, canceling their U.S. trip.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I was listening to the program, and a friend called from Nova Scotia, and every couple of years, we usually go down to the southwest of the United States in, this time of year, or in March or in April when the weather's not quite so great up here. Anyway, we all had this big chat today and decided that none of us are particularly comfortable going to the United States right now. We just don't want to spend our money down there. We don't want to go, just given what's just recently happened. So what we've decided to do is take the trip and make it a September trip in British Columbia and bring everyone out here from Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, and we'll do sort of a British Columbia trip through Squamish and maybe go into the interior.
Nice.
And then in April, I have a good friend who has a company in Vancouver called Great Explorations, and he runs everything from hiking trips, cycling trips, all throughout Europe, around the world, Gulf Islands, you name it. It's from Canada to lots of trips in Europe. Anyway, so we just decided that in April we'll probably do a trip with Robin and do something in Spain or in Portugal. And so I'm going to walk with my money as far as going to the United States goes. I just don't feel like I want to, spend my hard-earned cash in the United States right now.
I think you're not alone in feeling that. And Robin actually lives in my neighborhood. I'm always jealous of the tours he's taking everybody on, so enjoy your time with him. We've got time for one more call from Mar in Vancouver Island. Hi there.
Yes, hi.
Hi. So are you going to be doing any traveling in the U.S.?
No.
Okay.
No, I will never go there again.
Okay.
Unless this all gets sorted out and turned around. I don't know what Donald Trump thinks he's doing, and he's a bully. And you know what? The best thing for Canadians is to not give that country any money at all. Don't do business with them. Don't do anything. Somebody has to shake him up.
I think a lot of people are feeling a very similar sentiment, and I thank you for sharing that with us. And
you're welcome.
enjoy your time in Canada.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You as well. And, as you just mentioned, McKenzie, like this is a very common, it's not just about people wanting to not have to deal with the currency. This seems like a very personal statement that they are wanting to make because of the things that perhaps President Trump has done and that they fear he is going to continue to do.
Yeah, I think the currency is going to be a long-term issue
Always,
for us.
yes.
I think that will be a long-term driver, especially if the dollar goes down any further. But for sure, right now, it's definitely an emotional issue, and I'm torn on just from what I'm hearing from clients, if it's more about the tariffs or if it's more about the 51st state comments and the kind of constant jabs at Canada. I think that a lot of Canadians are that seems to hit people on a much more emotional level, whereas the tariffs are hitting Canadians on a more concerned about the future of our economy level, and maybe don't want to spend that extra cash if they're staring down the barrel of a recession. So I'm not sure what is the bigger driver, but the point is that both these issues are causing a major tangible change in the way that Canadians are traveling this year.
Right. We do have one last email that's come in from Rittiger. He writes, the American people are still our friends, are they not? Choosing not to travel to the U.S. is not going to hurt those who are making bad decisions that affect Americans as much as they affect us and others around the world. And I have heard that sentiment expressed by others, that there are many, many people in the U.S. that are feeling hurt by their president at this time, and that we don't want to alienate them. But I think for the next 4 years at least, we are going to be seeing this happening quite a bit.
That's a really hard issue to deal with. I've spoken to counterparts with tourism boards in the States, and the people that are going to get hurt by a boycott initially are going to be hotel employees, concierges, service workers, and many of them don't agree with the position that the U.S. government's taking. Many of them would support us, but we have to do what's best for us.
You're right. Thank you so much for joining us. McKenzie McMillan is a travel consultant with the Travel Group. It is 12:28, and this is BC Today. And we had plenty of emails over the last several days regarding the tariffs, the 25% tariffs that President Trump placed on aluminum and steel imports to the U.S. And we asked you who you thought would be best at dealing with Trump in the future. Here's a couple responses. Sherry writes, here is my sadness in this time of destabilization, chaos, and fear. Too quickly, we all want Trudeau to resign. Krista Freeland, with her own political ambitions, created the demand for that resignation. Conventional thought suggested it was the only option of many, and many, including me, thought it was the right action. Then the U.S. election, then the tariff threats, not to mention threats to Canadian sovereignty, threats to the sovereignty of other countries. We needed a professional, confident, measured, statesman-like pro-Canadian response. Who else but Trudeau could be that statesman at this moment? Lisa writes, I've never voted for any party other than the NDP, but for the federal election, I will vote Liberal for Mark Carney. I'm hoping he becomes leader because then Freeland would still work with him in a position, and I think they'd make a great team. If she wins, Carney will be gone. I'd really love it if he and she was leader of the federal NDP, then I think he would be the best leader. Singh is the weakest NDP leader we've had. And Dave says, facing the next 4 years with any Liberal leader again is simply absurd. Just look at the record of them. Thank you, as always, for taking the time to email us your thoughts. You can always email us bctoday@cbc.ca. And of course, it is time now for the CBC News to 12:30.
Good afternoon. Premier David Eby and other premiers are in Washington for a joint lobbying effort against the Trump administration's latest tariff threats. Trump is threatening 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum, including those products from Canada, starting March 12th. Evie says premiers are also working on clearing interprovincial trade barriers and diversifying the Canadian economy. A Vancouver Island elementary teacher has been charged with accessing child pornography. The Souk School District says the man has been employed there since 2016, and he most recently worked as a music teacher at David Cameron Elementary. Officials say the man has not been in the classroom this year due to unrelated circumstances. And Mounties in Salmon Arm say the RCMP's underwater recovery team has located the body of an 18-year-old who fell through ice on Shuswap Lake. The man was reported missing after slipping through the ice Saturday, but police were not immediately able to find him. The victim's name has not been released. And now the BC forecast. Arctic outflow warnings continue for Whistler and sections of the North Coast, and extreme cold warnings are in effect for Yoho National Park and the Elk Valley. Elsewhere, highs around -9 with a chance of light snow in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, mainly sunny with a high of -13. Highs from -13 to -5 with some sunshine in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, sunny with a high of -6. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, sunny this afternoon with highs around +1. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Thank you, Robert. Did you catch any of the Juno nominations?
I did not. Oh, I named some on my last newscast. Mother. Okay. I remember that one.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think the Bare Naked Ladies were nominated this year, so I know you're disappointed.
They're not. Oh, yeah, no. I was going to say they're not from BC, but they're not from BC.
They're not from BC. Canada.
I thought you were talking BC nominations.
It's a
Mother. Let's
whole
go.
big country, Robert. Whole big country. Thank you.
You bet.
And there will be lots more on the day's top stories on the afternoon shows in your region in Metro Vancouver. Here's what's coming up on the coast.
Hello there, it's Gloria Makarenko here with a look at a few things we've got lined up already for On the Coast this afternoon. In the past 3 years, many Ukrainians have come to Canada through a specific visa program. And that visa, it's expected to expire at the end of next month. So on the show this afternoon, we're going to hear from the Canadian-Ukrainian Congress. They want to make sure Ukrainians will be able to stay in this country. Also, with the nominees for the Juno Awards announced today, we'll talk more about just who's on that long list as Vancouver prepares to welcome some of the biggest Canadian stars in the business next month. I hope you can join us for On the Coast between 3 and 6.
Thank you, Gloria. And yes, we will be basking in the Juno excitement in the next half hour. And you can hear On the Coast on CBC Radio 1 in Metro Vancouver and anywhere on the CBC News app. And obviously, excitement is building for the Juno Awards that will be held here in Vancouver on March 30th. The Juno Award nominations were announced this morning, showcasing some of the best artists in Canadian music. And while popular artists like Tate McRae racked up multiple nominations, plenty of lesser-known acts have been recognized as well. So how do you feel about the Juno nominations? Any surprises or disappointments? And who are your favorite local and Canadian artists? Let us know. Call us at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. And you can email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. Joining us now is the host of CBC-BC's music show, Vibin, Rohit Joseph. Hi, Rohit. Welcome back to BC Today.
Thank you, Amy. It wasn't that long ago I was on here talking music about the
halftime. Yeah, what did you?
We've got our own spectacle here in Canada. Who needs that?
Who needs Kendrick? You know. So okay. Nominations came out this morning at 8 o'clock, and obviously everybody is always awaiting them to see who gets the nod. So walk us through the nominations from today.
Yeah, I'll start with sort of the big picture look. I mean, we've got quite a bit of big star representation here. Tate McRae getting 5 nominations, as you alluded to in the intro. Also, Josh Ross from Waterdown, Ontario, getting 5 nominations as well. It looks like country is truly taken over. I mean, we've seen the rise of country music and country stars over the last few years, and it looks like Canada's country music scene is no exception to that. The Weeknd and Shawn Mendes getting 4 nominations each. No surprise there. They're always regulars at the Junos. But what I'm really excited to see is the BC representation and just the sheer number of first-time nominees this year.
Well, and I think that's one thing that I've always loved and really embraced about the Junos is quite often it's an introduction to newer artists that you perhaps hadn't had a chance to listen to. Were there any big surprises for you? As you said, like, we've got sort of the big artists that are internationally recognized. We'll play a clip actually from, I think, the most nominated, or one of the most nominated artists, of course, Tate McRae from Calgary. Obviously, not a big surprise. You can't turn on a radio without hearing her. Same with The Weeknd. But were there any big surprises or even any big disappointments that you had this year?
Okay, how about I start with a disappointment first, and then we'll go into...
Get that out of the way.
Get the disappointment out of the way. I mean, I would have thought Nelly Furtado would have gotten a nomination for something, considering that it had been such a long time since she had put out new music.
Yes.
Last year, she dropped 7, which I don't know if you got to hear any of it, Amy, but I thought there were some great tracks on it, and it had that like Nelly Furtado classic mix of Latin influence, of Caribbean influence, but then she, modernized her sound quite a bit. One of my favorite tracks from that album, Corazon, I feel like at least that song could have got a little bit of love. It wasn't even that long ago. Nelly Furtado hosted last year. So I'm just a little surprised. Victoria's own, BC's own Nelly Furtado couldn't have got... I was
surprised at that too, because I feel like in the last year there's sort of been this, we call it a Nelly-assance. Like, I feel like a lot of people either started re-listening to her. I know my teens sort of discovered her for the first time and were like, who is this? She's fabulous. So I was very surprised by that. So yeah, that was a little disappointment. I think a lot of people here in BC and especially on the island have a very, very large soft spot for Nelly in their hearts. So maybe next year.
I know, and maybe next year. And the thing is, her legacy is cemented. She's won 10 Junos already. I mean, it's not like she absolutely needed this, but it would have been nice. That being said, some pleasant surprises for sure. I mentioned earlier there was a lot of people that got their first time nominations ever for a Juno. CBC Music counted this up. It's 117 artists this year that earned their first ever Juno nominations, including Victoria's A.P. Dillon, who got 3. He performed at the Junos last year, so it's nice to see that they're actually recognize him with proper nominations this year. Well deserved. Karan Aujla is also in several categories, including Single of the Year. Interesting note, the Single of the Year is actually got 4 different languages represented, not just English. So kind of cool that Punjabi, French, indigenous languages are part of the mix there. It's kind of about time, if you ask me, that like Canada's, music award show actually recognizes the sheer diversity of languages, not only spoken but sung in this country. So I think there's some progress to kind of diversify sonically and culturally the Juno nominations this year, and that was really nice to see. And I think it's something that people from all different backgrounds love to see reflected.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that the Canadian music scene always has had so many different cultural influences, but it hasn't. At times, the music has gone through phases of being very homogenized and appealing to the masses, where, I think a lot of people are finally realizing this does appeal to the masses, that we want to see everybody represented in what we're listening to. I would love to get anybody's feedback on not just the Juno nominations this year, but if you've got a musician, a band, anybody, either locally in BC or in Canada, that you think needs to get more ears, let us know. Now's your chance to give them a shout out. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Email bctoday@cbc.ca. Maybe you're in a band, maybe you're releasing something, you just think people should know about it. Now's your chance. What did you think of sort of or what do you think? I feel like Canadian music in the past has not been thought of in necessarily a derogatory way, but if you had asked somebody, what makes Canadian music, they're going to say something like Anne Murray. Not necessarily the most popular, not necessarily, the coolest, I say in quotes. Do you feel like Canadian music has really overcome that, or do we still sort of have to fight back against that stereotype?
That's a really good question. I mean, personally, I think the proof is there that Canadian music has gone mainstream globally. I mean, you look at artists like Snotty Nose Rez Kids, who have emerged out of Kitimat, BC, out of Haisla Nation, and taken the world by storm, going on global tours, bringing their authentic voices and changing up the hip hop game like radically. And I mean, it's just amazing to see. They've been represented in TV shows like Reservation Dogs. Their songs getting played on that, and it's like, we've gone global for a while now. I mean, obviously there's the superstars like the Michael Bublé's, the Shawn Mendes, the Tate McRae's, the Drakes, the Justin Biebers, whatever. I mean, sometimes people might even forget they're Canadian because they become so big. They become something more universal, and they also end up buying homes in LA. So whatever, sometimes we forget they're Canadian, but
I think that's very true.
What I'm saying is it's been, Canadian music has been cool and mainstream for a while now. But I think what makes the Canadian music scene more interesting is that, yes, we have those heavy hitters, those superstars, but we still, I think, try to foster, independent music, trying to foster more groups that are doing something a bit different. I mean, and it's nice to see the Junos recognize a group like Mother, who have been, indie rock darlings for over a decade now, for so long. They're up for Group of the Year this year. Spirit Box, one of the who originally formed in Victoria, they're up for Metal Album of the Year and a Group of the Year as well. So it's really cool to see that. And Blue Moon Marquee, a blues group out of the Vancouver Island, getting some nominations and love. It's like you're seeing so many different artists. One of my favorites, actually, Amy, that's like just an example of that niche but super cool part of Canadian music is this group called Ragaverse. They combine jazz with Indian classical music, and it's phenomenal. And they're up for a jazz Juno, and that's so cool to see. Like, that jazz music doesn't have to be this one thing that we think of. It can be so much more. It can be so much more, globally influenced. And I think that's the thing that we're starting to see, that like artists that have also been recognized in previous Junos, like Pierre Quenders, these artists are embracing their own cultural identity, and it's being recognized not only here in Canada but around the world. It's good to see that we're giving them love, and that really this music is, as it turns out, not just like a niche thing, not just like you get one little category for it. They're starting to compete in the biggest categories, in the albums of the year, in the singles of the year.
Right.
That's something that we're finally seeing, and I think Canadian music is showing its true colors that way.
I couldn't agree more. I also just want to backtrack and say, in no way was I disparaging Anne Murray, because I could sing any of her songs word for word at karaoke. So love her. She is a national treasure. That was not what I was trying to prove. What do you think about the addition of new categories this year, like South Asian music, finally getting that specific shout out and representation?
It's interesting. I mean, I could talk about the South Asian music category as having, I have a bit of mixed feelings about it. On one hand, great that, you know, there is this recognition that, yeah, we produce a lot of South Asian talent, particularly in the Punjabi music scene, Punjabi language. It's these stars like AP Dhillon and Karan Aujla are superstars around the world, and particularly getting a huge fan base from India. But it's almost limiting in a way. That's the other part that I feel. First of all, South Asia, huge subcontinent we're talking about, so it's hard to like really reduce it to
one
this
little category.
One category, and even though they are in that category, it's like Karan Aujla and AP Dhillon are also in the big. They're kind of competing in the bigger category.
Yes,
so I'm
very much so.
I'm almost more. I'm more wanting to see that, like that artists from these different ethnic and cultural groups are able to compete on the so-called universal categories.
Yeah.
You know, the ones, the most prestigious categories. That to me is a bigger deal than like, oh, you get this one little category. But that's perhaps just my opinion on it. I do think it's nice to see a bit of that reflection and representation, but I still think, like, at the end of the day, the most important thing is to see us recognize music from different groups and different backgrounds and see them as part of the universal Canadian experience.
For sure. And I really appreciate you making that point, because I think some people, perhaps that's not a perspective they think of. They think this is, you know, having this separate small one category is a great step for representation, but you know, perhaps we don't want to silo them in and relegate them to just one category that they're available for. That being said, we do have a lovely piece of music from AP Dhillon that I think most people would love to see.
ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕਰ ਤੱਕੀ ਲਾਉਂਦੇ ਅਸਮਾਨ ਨੂੰ ਹੜੇ ਆਇਆ ਸਦਾ ਚੱਲਦਾ ਨਵਾਨ ਨੂੰ ਚੱਲੀ ਸੀਜੀ ਜੱਟ ਕੱਢਦੀ ਪਰਾਨ ਨੂੰ.
And we've had a couple of emails come in, Rohit, so I will just read those for you. Hazel writes, don't forget Nanaimo's own David Gogo is nominated for Blues Album of the Year, along with, as you mentioned, Blue Moon Marquee, also based in BC. Melissa writes, Proper Man and Texas Major out of Kelowna deserve a listen. And Scotty writes, wanted to give a shout out to a couple of bands on the Sunshine Coast that are just killing it and so good. The post-pump psych rock band Janky Tiger and the gritty alt rock band, the Atchies. So I will have to add those all to a playlist. Rohit, is there a category that kind of holds special interest or that you watched most closely for the Juno noms?
I wouldn't say I only watch one category with specific interest, but I will say this. The one that I end up always being very attuned to, because I want to also find out about new talent, is Breakthrough Group of the Year, or Breakthrough Artist of the Year, I should say. But the funny thing about that category, I find, is a lot of these artists I've already heard of by the time they get into the breakthrough.
You've got an inside track hosting your own show about new music in BC.
You might say that, but I swear, I think the Junos has a habit of, by the time these groups have already broken through, they're like, oh yeah, we should probably get them on there. But okay, that being said, that is a...
Have you heard about this guy, The Weeknd? He's great.
Yeah, a few years back, they had Patronata as a breakthrough artist, and he had already gone on world tours by then. I think you've broken through. That being said, like AP Dhillon, okay, he's considered a breakthrough artist of the year. And while maybe a lot of English Canada hadn't heard of him,
sure,
he's already been one of the most streamed artists in the
world.
So, yes. You know, I would say breakthrough is with a grain of salt.
Okay.
That being said, there's still some interesting artists there that I'm paying attention to that I'm going to definitely check out more of. One of them being Zaina, who kind of combines Middle Eastern, French, and English. She's like quadlingual. I don't know. She's so talented. Overachiever. I know us monolingual folks can't even sing, dance, or speak one language that well. That's me I'm talking about.
That's me.
But Zaina is somebody that I'm definitely interested in. Nemesis has been getting some love. So there are actually some artists in the breakthrough category that are like on that up and coming status and are worth paying attention to. And that's a category that I think is just good to, reflect with a grain of salt, because there will be some entries there, some artists there that have very well broken through. But
just maybe not here.
yeah, maybe not. Maybe not to some, but I would say it's a great place to see, okay, who are some of the artists I should be paying attention to? Who are some of the artists that deserve a listen? So I would recommend folks check that category out if they want to see who's the new talent in town.
We do have a call actually in from Sonia in Kelowna. Hi, Sonia.
Hi there.
So any favorite Canadian artists that you want to give a shout out to today?
Yes. There's a band out of Toronto that my husband and I saw for years around the 2000s. They're called the Birthday Massacre.
Okay.
They're sort of a gothy, synth pop, super fun, great performers. But from BC, now that we live here, I can mention Josh and Bex. They are a beautiful dream folk duo. Gorgeous music.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that.
One more. Have you heard them?
I have. Yeah, incredible.
I love them. I've got one more recommend. He's on the coast. I believe he's out of Whistler. His name is Ryan Harris. Gorgeous acoustic music and a fantastic voice.
Well, thank you for those. I always love it when people sort of share music that they've connected to that other people maybe haven't heard of, and it sort of starts this trickle. I always imagine if I recommend a song, somebody's going to be listening to it in their car when they drive another friend somewhere, and so on and so forth, because that's how I listen to so much music. Thank you for that, Sonia. Rohit, wanted to ask you about the Canadian Music Hall of Fame inductees. What do you make them? Is it Sum 41 this year?
Yeah, Sum 41, well, they have a special place in my heart. When I moved to Canada, when I was like 9 years old, Sum 41 was probably the first Canadian group that I got into. I mean, In Too Deep, it was a song that just hooked me. And like, I don't know, I get nostalgic because I think of Much Music when it was very culturally important in the early 2000s, and seeing Sum 41, who also had an amazing brown guitarist who I'm forgetting the name of right now, a South Asian background guy. He's amazing though. But I'm just saying, like, just to see a group like that and they're killing it on the world stage, and their music was appearing in like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games, it was a big deal. It's like, okay, I've come to a country with a superstar group, and as I learned, many superstar artists. It just felt cool. It felt like liking Sum 41 was cool. So they have a special place in my heart. I'm so glad that they are getting that Hall of Fame status finally.
All right. And we do have one more call coming in from Basil in Port Coquitlam. Hi, Basil.
Hi, thanks for the program.
Oh, well, you are welcome. Thanks for calling in. Any recommendations for music that we should be listening to?
Well, I'm speaking up for the older crowd, which many of the seniors around. And, the music of the day, regardless who I've heard, you can't really make out what the heck they're singing about. The music seems to drown them out, or for whatever reason, they keep their music, their singing down and lower than the music. And so you really can't make out what they're saying. I really like a couple from Port Coquitlam called the Shoe Shakers. Now, you can hear every word as clear as a bell, and they play beautiful ballroom dance music. Just great for people that love to ballroom dance.
I love that recommendation, Basil, and I love the name, the Shoe Shakers. That is just great. Thank you for calling in for that. And Rohit, it is, music does go through different changes, and it's not always for every generation, but that is one thing that's wonderful about music, is it can be so connecting, and a lot of songs really do appeal to so many different age groups, and depending on where somebody is in their life, it sort of, I guess, resonates with them differently. What do you see, or what would you sort of say to sum up, if you can, the British Columbia music scene? What do you think kind of defines it right now?
That's a great question. I think what's defining our music scene right now is just creativity, innovation. I'm seeing a lot of that going on right now because, let's be real, like Vancouver and BC, as big a deal as we think we are, we're not necessarily the first place people think of as like global music hubs.
Fair.
But we're starting to create that talent and be incubators for that talent. And I feel like the independent music scene here is going strong. We're seeing lots of collaboration between artists. I could name a bunch that I've been featuring on Vibin and that I think will start to get more and more Juno recognition or world recognition. Yeah. Basil was mentioning how so much music these days is more beat focused or more like focused on the sound and the lyrics and vocals. I get that, and that's actually a fair critique.
Totally.
And some of the artists that I'd recommend checking out that might kind of counter that. Well, one is I Am the Living, who we recently had on Road to the Junos.
Yeah.
You'll be getting to hear his whole set. It was amazing. I got to see it at the Pearl live and host that show. That's somebody who cares about the lyrics, who cares about the vocals, but on top of that, having a tight live band perform with them for recording his music as well. So what I'm saying is there's a lot of creativity. There's a lot of artists who are also going to do things differently. They might put their music out on YouTube and care more about the sort of digital presence they have, the social media presence they have, and then kind of blow up from there. But the other beautiful thing I'm seeing is artists come together in jam spaces and invite each other to each other's shows to open for each other. That's happening a lot more in the indie scene here in BC, in Vancouver and Victoria, especially in the punk rock scene as well. So you're going to see a lot more, I think, collaboration and artists kind of lifting each other up from here. And that's something that's so nice to see. And I think that'll carry our whole scene forward as a result.
And we are just about out of time. We got about 30 seconds left with you, Rohit. But do you think the Junos are reflecting Canadian music, or do we need to see a bit more opening of various categories?
I think we could always use more opening, but what I will say is I've seen some progress. I'm seeing also less, let's be real, Ontario, Quebec focus. There's a bit more, diversity in geography too. So it's getting there. The Junos, they be getting there.
It'll be their new slogan. They be getting there. Thank you so much, Rohit. Rohit Joseph, the CBC host of the CBC Music Show Vibing. And don't forget, the Juno Awards will be airing live here on CBC and on CBC Gem March 30th. And that is our show for today.